Steeped in myth, worshipped for his heroism, Thor is known across the cosmos as the God of Thunder, a millennia-spanning deity whose adventures in Marvel Comics cover only a fraction of his life. As a superhero with mystical powers, the character has traveled across the universe and battled all manner of villains that have challenged his vast strength and his seemingly unstoppable will. Yet Thor has remained a god whose compassion and courage spring eternal. But what happens when godhood itself is questioned? Thor's status as a god and the meaning of such an existence came under scrutiny when writer Jason Aaron took over the hero's ongoing story in 2012 with the series Thor, God of Thunder. In his inaugural 11-issue story comprised of 2 arcs, The God Butcher and Godbomb, Aaron and artist Esad Ribic launched a saga that has spanned more than 6 years, testing Thor's determination and, most importantly, his beliefs. But here, in this debut heavy metal fantasy, Aaron takes an eons-spanning battle over the fate of the universe and turns it into a personal crisis of faith for the God of Thunder. The story found in these comics simultaneously plays out on 2 very different thematic levels, which bounce off of and strengthen one another, despite their contradictions. One is the visceral, fun thrill of gigantic, heavy metal-inflected action that really leans into the strengths of Thor and his unique comic book world. The other is the subversive, atheistic questioning of godhood that is threaded throughout the plot and informs its characters' actions. Together, they make Aaron's debut one of the great Thor stories because of how much they both interrogate and celebrate its subject. By analyzing how these 2 layers are represented, we can understand how Aaron fractures Thor and his world via the God Butcher. Several years after his rebirth in the pages of Thor Volume 3 in 2007 by J. Michael Straczynski, the Thunderlord's story was in need of yet another refresh, which Aaron accomplished by creating a story tightly focused on Thor. These 11 issues of God of Thunder begin with Thor answering a young girl's prayers on a distant planet, bringing rain to dry lands and saving her and her people. When Thor discovers the planet's gods have been massacred, he's set on a path to defeat the villain known as Gorr the God Butcher, whose sole purpose is to slaughter every deity throughout the universe. Over the course of the first 5 issues, we also learn of the first time Thor and Gorr met, but this saga also spans eons, simultaneously taking place in the distant past with a young Thor still unworthy of wielding Mjolnir, the modern heroic Thor, and the future King Thor, ruling over a decimated Asgard. Reflecting on his debut, Aaron revealed, "I wanted to do a story that had a huge scope and scale to it. This is not a story that you could do with every character in the Marvel Universe. Really, I'm just trying to lean into the fact that Thor is a god. He's immortal, and you can tell stories with him that you can't tell with most of the other characters in the Marvel Universe." By that same definition, Thor sort of demands those big, sprawling, epic stories. It's a saga that drips with the sort of heavy metal fantasy one would expect in the 80s, just without all the cheese and hairspray. Ribic's art is slick with blood, shaken by the never-ending clash of hammers, lit with world-ending explosions. It's a fitting accompaniment to the ever-increasing scope and sweep of Aaron's story, as Ribic frequently uses splash pages and double-page spreads to emphasize the mythological aesthetic of the story. Counter to these moments, Ribic's characters walk a line between believable physicality and godlike physique, keeping their intergalactic battles the stuff of legend while still allowing for some vulnerability. Frequent close-ups underline Thor's emotions or create comic relief in contrast to these epic moments. "There's a Frank Frazetta and Heavy Metal the Magazine feel to the book, which I love," said Aaron. "It feels like it should be part fantasy story and part Molly Hatchet album cover, in addition to being a superhero book. It's a mixture of all that stuff. There's a lot of sci-fi elements too, in terms of Esad's design." Colorists Dean White and Eve Sorsina bring Ribic's line work to vivid life with lush, painterly hues. Soft white snow, swirling, inky space. The electric glow of Thor's lightning that casts sharp relief against all manner of monolithic wonders. And buckets of blood and ale in equal measure. Letterer Joe Sabino helps to subtly contrast characters through typography and captioning, as the Thors speak in a serif font to denote their ancient royalty, as opposed to the typical sans serif spoken by others. Meanwhile, Gorr's speech is wavering and heavily inked, suggesting a ragged voice calling from the darkness. Sabino's captions also highlight the shift in perspective that occurs halfway through the series, with the first 5 issues told by the inner monologues of the 3 Thors, and the last 5 told from omniscient perspective and captions styled to look like paper torn from an ancient book. The perspective shift allows Aaron to broaden the mythological feel of the story and burrow into the thoughts and feelings of any character. Issue 6, the standalone Gorr origin What the Gods Have Wrought, is penciled by Butch Geiss and lacks any form of captioning, creating a story that the readers alone are privy to know. Yet for all the fantastical wonders seen in these pages, Aaron works to subvert the joy of such incredible cosmic conflict with questions regarding godhood and belief. In my travels, I have learned that there are two kinds of gods, those who do harm and those who do nothing at all. I have yet to decide which I find more worthy of my wrath, but soon enough it will no longer matter, as all gods will have one very important trait in common. They will all be dead. Aside from a couple brief appearances, the saga of the God Butcher is mostly devoid of pre-existing characters. Instead, Thor becomes his own supporting character as all three versions of the hero eventually team up to defeat Gorr in the future. And yes, that time travel creates all sorts of paradoxes and plot holes when examined too closely. As a character, Thor holds several different aspects of himself in contention with one another. Of course, Thor Odinson is a superhero. He's also a cosmic explorer that travels between ancient realms. There's also the human side of Thor, thanks to his infrequent dual identity of Donald Blake. But first and foremost, Thor is a god. After all, the hero and his world are pulled directly from Norse mythology, liberally sampled and changed at will by co-creators Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, and Larry Lieber. These many disparate elements were all present during Thor's debut in 1962 and have individually waxed and waned in the years since, depending on the focus of the creative team. Here, Thor feels like he should be spray painted onto the side of every van in sight. Aaron and Ribich's saga embraces the heavy metal, rip-roaring medieval fantasy of Thor. Doing so celebrates the wildest pagan god dreams possible with this kind of character, while weaving together ideas that make both reader and hero question the worth of such godhood. He struggled to put doubts from his mind, worries that buried within Gorr's vengeful rants, there was some small ember of truth, a truth that threatened to consume him. It's a perspective deeply tied to Aaron's personal life. Growing up in the South, I was raised Southern Baptist. You grow up with religion and pork and college football, and that's all you know for most of your life. I still love two of those things, so I grew up with faith and religion as a big part of my life, until I got to be 19 or 20 in college and just got to a point where it didn't make sense for me anymore, and I didn't buy into it. I've been an atheist for many years, but I've remained fascinated by religion. If anything, I've become more fascinated by religion and faith after I lost mine. From a design perspective, Ribich moves the hero further into fantasy motifs. Young Thor is largely stripped of armor or gaudy costumes, instead often fighting shirtless and wielding the massive axe Jarnbjorn. The result is that the not-yet-worthy hero feels more akin to Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian instead of Kirby's sci-fi adventures. Modern Thor takes the more realistic design started by Straczynski and Olivier Coipel and strips it down further, removing the chainmail and turning the helmet completely into metal. Thor wears his symbol on his belt now, recalling the ancient Norse interpretation of Mjolnir and further tying the character to his mythological roots. Finally, old King Thor is missing an arm and an eye, covered in many scars, sporting a hefty beard and protected by thick, layered metal armor. This Thor of the future is far too similar to Odin for the modern hero's liking, and makes reader and hero question what could turn the hopeful god of thunder into such a jerk. The answer, at least in some part, is Gorr the God Butcher, who has come to rip the immortals apart, but it's his beliefs that plant the true seeds of destruction. Gorr himself is a formidable foe and eventually is provided with enough motivation and pathos to nearly make him sympathetic, if it weren't for all the pleasure he takes in killing. Aaron first introduces the antagonist as a threat to young Thor, nearly killing him centuries ago, only to be brutally defeated by the young god. But despite thinking him dead, Gorr has been picking off gods one by one, only just now coming back into Thor's life. At the story's midpoint, Gorr travels into the future, where he slowly turns the pantheons into his slave workforce, resulting in the King Thor we've seen and creating the Godbomb, a mystical weapon that will kill every god at every moment of history when detonated. The sheer bloodlust of Gorr is terrifying on its own, but Aaron uses issue number 6 to help us understand the mind of such a man. Gorr's tragic life on a desolate planet sees him lose his mother, pregnant wife, and children to famine and disaster, all while the people around him tell him to pray to the gods. But what grace or care have the gods ever shown in return? His renunciation of faith and blasphemy are soon contrasted by the crash landing of two gods locked in battle. Gorr was an atheist for good reason. There was no cause for belief. But this sudden revelation of indifferent godhood drives him mad. He kills the gods and takes their mighty weapon, all black the Necro Sword, flying out into the universe to kill every god alive, in the hopes of setting people free from the indifferent gods who set man against man for their own glory. Yet our three Thors refute Gorr's idea that all gods are selfish and cruel. The young Thor may be headstrong and naive, but he's brave and selfless when he needs to be. King Thor is broken and jaded, but still holds out a little hope for the salvation of the gods. Between them, our modern Thor stands as our true protagonist. He is kind to the defenseless, indomitable in his will to fight on, self-sacrificing when the lives of millions are on the line. All three spark belief and devotion within those that witness their heroism and help each other grow. There is no doubt to the reader that Thor is truly a good god. The tragedy is that Thor doubts in himself. Locked in a desperate struggle, Gorr pierces the modern Thor's beliefs after witnessing him save a planet caught in their crossfire. You know I'm right. That's why you fight so hard. Why you try so desperately hard to seem noble. Because you see just how petty and useless your kind truly are. You know what I know. That gods have never created or cared for anything, except themselves. The god who doubts. Heh, I changed my mind. You're my favorite Thor. But what of the many gods that prove to be fodder for the butcher? In the Marvel Comics universe, gods are plentiful and inhabit endless planets. The 9 realms divide the cosmos in the stories of Thor, yet Midgard and the many galaxies within the main Marvel universe seem to spread out to infinity. In God of Thunder, we see that every inhabited planet has its own gods, often aloof and uninvolved in a more deistic interpretation of godhood. But what makes a god a god? These deities hear the prayers of their people and have the power to change worlds, but lack omnipotence, benevolence, or omniscience. It's no wonder that Gorr's people suffered when the gods of the universe seem like little more than immortal weapons who play with helpless lives. Is a god who does not serve or care for his people truly deserving of faith and worship? And if so many across the universe are indifferent, what makes any of them worthy? Gorr dreams of a godless age, an age ruled by man, undivided by belief. If the gods never existed, perhaps people would find themselves elevated through their own power and united under one cause. It's not the reader alone who wonders such things. Thor too struggles with the weight of these questions, with the god reaching his lowest point as he fights to stop the Godbomb. What if they really are better off without us? Thor wondered in fear. What if a godless age is what they deserve? What if Gorr isn't a madman at all? Gods help us. What if he's... But Thor stays strong long enough to stop the Godbomb as he is prayed to by fellow gods across time and space. Absorbing the Necro Sword, he levels the God Butcher with an almighty blast from dual Mjolnirs. Yet Aaron still has one final cruel twist for Gorr. In his quest to destroy all deities, the villain has gained immortality, shaped worlds, and created life. The God Butcher has become a god. Not only that, but his murder spree led to the creation of a barren world, just like the one that started his own thirst for vengeance. With the bomb destroyed and his weapon taken from him, he's put out of his misery by the young Thor with one swing of Jarnbjorn. With Thor's victory through sacrifice, Aaron's omniscient narration proclaims him not just the greatest god who ever lived, but God of gods, the one deity willing to truly and selflessly do whatever it takes to save the universe. But what is a god of gods worth when such beings may lack any true virtue? Returning to his own time, Thor brings new gods to the planet of the innocent young girl whose faith sparked this cosmic quest. In this act of benevolence, the meaning of godhood, of blessing countless lives through power beyond mortal comprehension, is restored to Thor and his fellow gods. At least, for now. Little girl of Indigar, I said I would return to you, and I have. You prayed to me because your world had no gods. That is one prayer, I assure you. You need never pray again.